or if you run into like an unknown problem, there's always something that you go back to, your default state of what the fuck do I need to do when you're trying to answer that question. And I'm trying to figure out what that is when I ask you these questions. Because you don't necessarily want to be a useless piece of shit on the job, right?
Of course, yeah.
So the question we're always asking ourselves is, how do I not be a useless piece of shit? Cool. Okay. So behavioral interview. You read the doc, right?
Right.
It's your chance to actually show who you are as a professional developer, what the fuck you believe in. So, and that is like the center from which you build your narrative when you're talking to an interviewer. So, what's that for you?
Mm, like, I don't know, maybe talking the same language, maybe it's like, for me, it's like, yeah, well, you build some rapport, just like that we maybe do some small talk and maybe we then work on the problem in the end. Maybe I ask my questions, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's just communication and soft skills. But ultimately, that's like manager shit, man. I'm not gonna lie. Like I like this is the one of the I'm not gonna let's this side thing. This is why I do not want to become a manager because I have to talk to a lot of people, and I mean I do that right now as a senior engineer. But holy crap, that's like the part of the job I don't really like. I mean I have to wake up at 7 a.m. just to attend meetings with our team in Amsterdam, and holy shit, I don't want to do that. So talking to people is like the worst thing for me, and as an engineer, if we're hiring you, like most people don't really want to do that. So it's on some level, it's good that you like doing that. But on the other hand, it's not exactly what we're hiring you for. It's like the reason why we hire you is because we know you can do the engineering behind the job, behind the product, right? Because that's the difference between the
Right.
manager and the engineer. Like, don't get me wrong, you still need the soft skills, but you actually need to also have like the technical prowess, like the craftsmanship and the knowledge behind it to actually make something. And that's what we're hiring you for, to make it. So what is the core tenet of what you want? Like what's the core tenet you always go back to when you're trying to create something? That is what we're looking at when it comes to questions like this. So
Mm-hmm.
now,
And then how?
again, like talking is fine because you need to be able to ask people what the existing sources of information are. What do you not know? Obviously, no system is going to be big enough for one person to fully understand it. That's fine, but anyone can learn to communicate. Anyone can learn to talk. You know. But ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about like the hard skills. Like, for instance, do you believe more in the refactoring side of things? What's your balance for that? Like, when do you start realizing that, oh shit, I need to actually start refactoring the code versus, oh, I need to develop more features? When do you take the time to deep dive into the existing code base in order to fully understand what the hell you're doing versus, oh, well, we need to roll this out like by next Thursday. I don't have time for that. What is that balance for you, if that makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so
Okay,
I'm
but
gonna let me knowing that, let me ask you again. What do you believe in as an engineer? What's your core tenet?
well, yeah, I believe that yeah we can solve very complex problems with the technology. This is, I think, the idea.
Again, that's the wrong thing. Maybe I'm not clear. It's like it's the hard skills. Like you
Mm-hmm.
probably dealt with like build time, like build like inefficiencies in your development process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to submit a merge request, and you have to get that merge request approved. Then you have to wait for that diff to land. Then you have to wait for the build to come out, and so on and so forth. And so while you're doing that, there are, or if you run into like an unknown problem, there's always something that you go back to, your default state of what the fuck do I need to do when you're trying to answer that question. And I'm trying to figure out what that is when I ask you these questions. Because you don't necessarily want to be a useless piece of shit on the job, right?
Of course, yeah.
So the question people we're always asking ourselves is, how do I not be a useless piece of shit? And so let me phrase the question like that. How do you, what steps do you take to not be a useless piece of shit?
Yeah, I try to maybe write some efficient and scalable code, and that it's kind of really works. Yeah, that it's when I kind of deliver it, then it's kind of it. It's a proof it's gonna work. Something like this.
Okay, that's fair. Keeping scalability in mind, that's fine.
Hmm.
But when do you make that trade off? What factors do you consider when you write the scalability? And can you give me an example of when you couldn't write scalable code?
Okay, the trade-off is like, let's say I work in a team, and some people make a pressure on me. They really want to start working with my API, and although some methods are not kind of implemented, I say, okay, I will just either trivially implement them or implement them at the beginning, not in an efficient way, just to let those people finally work with my part. And then later I run some performance tests, and I see, okay, now this method, for example, is too slow. I need to improve it. So now I change my mindset. Now uh, for example, I had a problem with a web service, and under load it was slowing down. So I introduced caching. And because I was reading all the time from the disk, I introduced more worker threads on the server so that they can work in parallel. uh, this kind of stuff, and then it kind of improved. And for me, it was a trade-off. First, I write maybe not perfectly efficient code because I want to unblock the people, and later I improve it to this scalable level.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that is actually a sufficient answer to a lot of different questions. The answer you just gave is like, well, if I was in an actual interview, I would be the answer you just gave could be a good answer to the question of name one time you had a disagreement with your coworkers and how did you resolve it. And this is a perfect answer, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean, I'm just stripping it down into like the raw ideas behind it, and that's ultimately what all these questions are. We're trying to figure out what your default state is, and as a developer, and why you do it.
Hmm.
So now that I've exposed you to that, can you come up with like a slightly more, I would say, refined answer, something a more how do I describe it? More eloquent. So if I
Um,
ask you that question, name one time you had a disagreement. Use a different example. Name one time you had a disagreement with a coworker, and how did you resolve it?
okay, let's see. So it should be a different example, right?
Yeah, different example, but it should. But
Mm-hmm.
again, it goes back to how do you operate as a developer? Because the example you just gave was okay. Well, I want to write good code, but there was another coworker who wanted to push out the features as soon as possible. So in order
Mm-hmm.
to unblock him and help him push out the features, even though I didn't agree that the code should be written in such a way, I decided to just write the bare basics for him that passed the tests, and then I went back to refine it. And then from there, the interviewer can ask, okay, what were the technical complexities associated with that? So I'm asking you for another example. So
Mm-hmm.
in the meantime, I'll be writing stuff down in the doc for you. So while you
Okay.
think of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I thought of three examples. I don't know, two of them, they're fairly technical. One of them is a bit more technical.
I
So the
think
first one.
right. So in an actual interview, I'll be asking you probably for like the 30-second to 1 minute version of it, and then I'll dive into the technicals if it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, give me like the 30-second version.
Okay, so one of my API calls, it was one of my web methods. It was accepting a big file as an input, so like which would be like several megabytes or even gigabytes in size.
Mm-hmm.
And then the consumer, so the person who was writing the client, was trying to read that file from the disk to RAM first, and then send it to me. And I was trying to convince him it was not a good idea because it may not fit into RAM. And yeah, like I was pushing him to do this with this, like this, just streaming the file to my web method
Mm-hmm.
and not trying to load in the RAM. And eventually it was resolved because we had some example where it didn't work. We ran into out of memory exception and it broke, and then it convinced him to change it.
Okay, so you had an example. Was this in production or was this something that you generated?
This example, it was developer environment, what I've generated. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a fair thing to say. It's just like we had a disagreement of what API to use, and we resolved it by actually looking at the test that what actually could happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good starting point to have. Like that's fine. Like because what it says is you would rather prove it. I mean, you could prove like you would rather spend the time to actually prove your beliefs. I mean, that's one way you could phrase it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the
Yeah.
whole reason I'm
Interesting.
asking you for this is just so that way, as an exercise, for you to basically understand yourself, understand what you prioritize as a developer. Now, I could be completely
Mm-hmm.
wrong here, but
Yeah.
it's just like I'm just telling you ways how I would see it, how I would phrase it, and it's like once I understand those core tenets, then I can always go back to that. Like if we would take that, like I believe in proving ideas, then I would say then no matter what question I ask you, whether it is the disagreement with a coworker or name one time where you failed to deliver on deliverables or something like that, then you always go back to that core tenant and come up with a story or rephrase a story to fit the question.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
See. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
as an exercise, would you agree that you believe improving ideas? Just, I want to know if you truly believe that.
Yes. Yeah. I do.
Okay, so then let me ask you another question. Name one time. So, can you describe a situation where you had to drive a project?
Yeah. To draw a project. One of my latest project was related to machine learning, and I was the only one who was responsible for this machine learning part. So I was responsible for proving it works. I was responsible for writing the code which will deliver this core ML into a Docker container,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole team then need to follow up with me, like how they need to correctly use my service, and like I had always to explain how it actually works, this machine learning stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so, okay, so you had to drive a machine learning project. Okay, and you had to prove. So, where does proving it come in? If that's one of your core beliefs, you have to. I want to see you or hear you describe how you convince them with hardcore examples, if that makes sense.
No, okay, this was one situation when like I was giving some presentations and some numbers and formulas, and then
Mm-hmm.
one coworker always said, no, it's not gonna work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, no, he was always kind of opposing it. And then I was trying to kind of I was trying to find a way to approach him and to convince him. So basically we were doing some document classification, and then what I thought and what actually eventually convinced him, I just said, look, like for example, the spam filters in the emails, right? They are not perfect, but they work even in most cases. So what we are doing with document classification, when we try to classify documents between like sensitive information, non-sensitive information, is very similar and it's not the same, right? And of course, it's not 100% always correct, but it has its value, the same as spam filters do. And this was what convinced him.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how the proof. So your proof was you looked at the actual code and said, "Oh, this spam filter doesn't work as well as we think it does."
Uh, Not really. My proof was that I referenced to some system that already exists and they work properly, because the person was kind of arguing that what we're doing, this document classification with machine learning, doesn't have business value, is not correct from the technical point of view. But as I said, I use the same approach as those spam filters do. So it must work as well.
Oh, okay, yeah. So then you just say, so the way, so actually you have a lot of things that you can answer in that one story. One, it's because you're referencing an already existing system. That's your proof. And then name one time you had a disagreement with a coworker, how you resolved it. You were doing this project. Then you referenced a piece of code or some function that you did in an already existing system, and you basically, and see when you go back to just that, and you identify the core component of that story, you can just kind of phrase it differently in order to answer like a bunch of different questions.
Hmm.
So you see how easy that gets.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what I'm asking you. This is the point I'm trying to get at. It doesn't matter what I'm
Mhm.
asking you. All I care about is that core component. Of course, like there are other things, like for instance, when you're the responsibility you have as a senior developer versus a junior developer are very very different. Like a senior, you're supposed to be able to drive a project forward, get buy-in from other people, cross-functional teams, and those are elements to the story that will help. That is also I'm going to be looking for as well,
Mhm.
because I need to know that you're capable of actually doing these responsibilities, and that does play a big factor as well. But
Mhm.
ultimately, if you can always go back to what you believe as a developer, you'll never run out of stories. You will basically leave an impact on the interviewer, because when the interview is over, the interviewer is going to need, do I remember this fucking guy?
Oh, okay.
And if you just
May I?
always go back to that, then it's like, oh, I'm going to remember you because you believe in this.
Mhm. May I maybe discuss this one question which I think completely screwed my behavioral interview, or the answer was so bad that, as I said, the managers kind of get into argument with me, and after that it kind of went downhill.
Okay,
Can
yeah,
we?
yeah. Like, what was
Well,
the question? I remember you
the
saying you had.
question, the question was, tell me about the time when you pushed back to your manager about some solution. And my answer was that when I started to work on this machine learning project, I was kind of driving it, yes. So I was super motivated to do this. And after like 3 months, the management, they announced the decision to put it on hold and do something else. So the other project, which was at the time considered like more important, and then with the promise we will return back to this machine learning project. And me, because I was so invested in it, I kind of research and invested a lot of time. I came to the manager and I asked to uh, either not to do this, or at least to let me work on that machine learning project alone, so that I don't kind of lose the speed, because there were a lot of open topics and we had some time pressure, and at least make an exception for me. And then, yeah, in 3 months we will then with the team finish it. Uh, I think, yeah, this was my answer. Yeah, and
Okay.
then just tell me what the manager said. He kind of said, I don't understand like what makes you think that this machine learning project is more important than the other project. There, I think I answered. I would have answered better. So what I said, yeah, because I thought from my perspective that I could contribute much more to the machine learning project than to the other project because it was kind of very new for us, and eventually we didn't even contribute that much as a team. We just did some really basic stuff like testing, installation, not that much, not that deep. So I said I believe that I could have provided more value. And then again, he got a bit more irritated. He says, yeah, but how do you define value? Do you have some KPIs? How do you decide that? What makes you think that
Uh-huh.
kind of your work there will be more appreciated? And this is, yeah, the setup, it went not so well. And like what probably I forgot to say is that our CEO actually announced, I mean, it was taken so seriously, those machine learning topics, that CEO announced that we need to start working on this, and each team must have like one person, and we need to report like almost quarterly to our like even higher management, not to my direct manager, but like my second liner, third liner. We need to report what we're doing in this direction. It was super important. So I forgot to mention this, and I came with this explanation of value, which is kind of also not false, but I think I failed to mention like why it wasn't important from the company perspective. So
Yeah.
what's
Okay. Okay. I understand the story. So you mentioned this story in one of your interviews.
right?
What was the reaction from the interviewer?
Well, so he started to, what I can say, maybe he was a bit irritated. He was kind of arguing with me, and in the end, he even told me like, "Yeah, you see this because we always do at Amazon in this way that has business value. That's why our shares grow so." So high, it was a bit funny to hear, but this was the conclusion, and he was a bit kind of as like coaching me or something, which I kind of didn't really like. So yeah, it looks like he was a bit irritated. This is how I could
Yeah.
judge.
So I'm gonna say, just based on what you just told me, you need to just practice those stories because it gets pretty long winded. In fact, like I think you probably spent like 2 minutes just being able to describe a story that you could have just described in like 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what it boils down to. And second, that story really is not good, and I'm gonna tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
One, it
Mm-hmm.
means that you're going against the decisions of your manager and by proxy a bunch of other people, because chances are this came from the top down. So your manager was correct in asking the right questions. What value do, are you going to bring by working on this project that we told you not to work on? And I think that's absolutely a fair question because of it, because every single project, the underlying at the end of the day, needs to deliver some value to the company. That's why you work on it. And so your story of arguing with the manager and pushing back like that isn't really great. Because I mean, it's a catch-22 because the guy's asking you, name one time you pushed back against the manager,
Exactly.
but then you should be able to demonstrate that you have some level of respect for him, and then uh, the fact that you decide to push back on an area of value or like try a change of assignment is not good only because it just makes you seem combative. Then again, there's no really good way to answer this question. Like as an example, let me see if I can answer that question. Um, I used to work at Apple, and one of the things was that we were deferring a lot of testability of modules in order to push out features. And I remember I was like pushing for the longest time for about 6 months that hey, we need tests, we need tests, we need tests, and we're just like oh well we need to develop these other features. We can always go back and fix it later if we need. And so my pushback was that, well, look at all the developer time we're spending fixing regressions, and these are obviously killing team morale. If you ask anyone, this is their number one concern. And I believe that we can develop these features faster if we just introduce testability. Let me just spend 20% of my time working on these when I should be doing working on testability when I should be doing the time allotted for bugs as a compromise, and I just asked for that. They initially said no, just because of the situation we're in, and I went along with it. But eventually, we got into a cycle where it was clear that I could have some free time to try and work and drive this project. And I just did a proof of concept for the tests. And I just proposed, okay, well, here's how you run the test. Here is how you decide. Here's like, and just for this one module, always run this test. And let's see how it performs. And eventually, the project, my testability project, got greenlit, and it became its own entire thing for an entire cycle. So this is the way I would present the story, at least my story, because that's actually what happened. But you kind of see like the narrative I built there was that I believe in this test. I believe in testability. And if I really believe in it, I will spend the time to integrate it into our workflow. But if ultimately at the end of the day, if the manager says no, I will follow. At least this is what I'm trying to impress upon you, and hopefully you got the impression based on me telling that story.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Good. So then I see how quickly I was able to deliver that. I described exactly the situation. I basically said what was the result of it, and I basically filled in a bunch of other potential follow-ups just from that one story alone. And this is kind of like what I want you to do with your question and answer. It's that I want you to be able to say these stories in a way that makes you basically not look like an asshole.
Yeah, I was not aware of it. Actually. Yeah, then I also added that. Yeah, I of course I work on the other project. I accepted the manager decision, and then yeah, the interviewer said, yeah, I see the ownership is important and commit and disagree is important, but still, yeah, it was probably too bad.
I would yeah, and if you said that, then I think what probably pissed him off was probably that you took too long to say it,
Could be.
or you didn't say it interestingly enough, and he probably just got really annoyed and bored. That's probably that'd be my best guess. And there's probably like a bunch of other things. You probably kept doing this for every other question he asked you, and that probably just built up, and then he's just like whatever. So I think based on what you just told me, you just need to practice your stories, and yeah.
Yeah, maybe I will need to make them shorter.
Shorter, get to the point. Every single word you say means something. If you need to spend like 2 minutes thinking about it, that's fine. But ultimately, I think going into the interview with like 4 stories that you've rehearsed and that you can twist and mold into whatever question that they ask. In fact, I'll write that down for you. So you come to the interview with 4 stories that you rehearsed, and you can twist to answer any or most questions. I would say benchmark it to 1 to 2 minutes. Let's benchmark it to like 1 to 2 minutes. You should have like a 30-second version, a 2-minute version, and 30-second version and a 2-minute version, and be able to dive into the technical complexities if asked. Because most of the time, people just want the high, like these surface level idea behind it, and then if there is some like wrinkle in there, like, oh wait, why did you make this decision? Then you should be able to dive into the technical complexity. Then, not before, because most of the time we might be aiming at something completely different. We might not care about the technical complexity. We might care about, is this guy a team player? Is this guy respectful? That sort of thing. And if that is our objective, then we don't really care about your technical complexity.
Yeah, I also think I had some kind of maybe confirmation bias because, as I said, in March I had the Microsoft interview and I had a lot of those behavioral questions. And the way I answered, I got the offer, right? So I thought they were perfect. My stories. I think this is also another issue. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, there's always something that people can improve, even if you get the offer. It's like there's always some element that is missing because human language is like very limiting. It's like an approximation of ideas. So not all the ideas you want to present will necessarily get across. And that inefficiency means that there's always a room to improve.
And I also asked, like, if in the 30-second version, if let's say I take the star format, there are 4 elements I need to cover. I have 7.5 seconds for each element. Like, how is it possible? How would you reduce that? Because I really practice in star format.
So I don't know what star format is.
Situation, task, action, result. This is what they want in Amazon.
Yeah, like it's like one sentence for each one, and that gets you to 30 seconds. Like if I were
Hmm.
like, for example, if you asked me to do your machine learning projects, like my situation is to I was asked to work on I was asked to change projects when I was working on a machine learning project that I felt that I could have more impact with. So then
Hmm.
what's the T?
Task.
Task. Well, I already described situation and task right there.
Yeah, so there's the merge it. They merge it to SAR. Yeah, they omit T sometimes. Yeah.
And then the action I took. So then, if I were to follow it, and then so the action you took was I tried to convince the manager that I would be more valuable on the machine learning
Hmm.
project um, versus the new project. And the
Hmm.
result was that the manager decided to continue on with the new feature, and I listened to him and was respectful of his time. And
Hmm.
then I might also add on a little more results, like I felt that I still felt that the value. No, that's not a good way of saying it. It's like I'm trying to figure out a way that makes you look better, other than just like a guy who just like is a total bitch to the manager. Like, because
Yeah.
like your job as a developer is to protect the fucking code, and if the manager says to do something that destroys the code base, you really should be very very objectionable to that.
Hmm.
So it's
I
like you need to
see.
have like a respectful spine.
Hmm.
So I don't know off the top of my head how I would phrase it, but that's kind of like
Uh,
what I would be careful of.
and and also how do I know? Should they tell the 30-second version or 2 minute version? How do I know?
I would usually try going with the. It depends on how interesting the story is. If the story is like cut and dry, 30 seconds. If the story is more interesting and you think you could provide a lot more dimension to yourself and the question it's as well, then I would go with the 2 minutes.
Hmm.
The reason why is because most again it just depends on what the interviewer's objective is, which you really can't tell. But if you can learn, like body language, and you can understand like their face, you can understand. Okay, wait, is he just wanting something fast? Is he just wanting something slow?
Hmm.
I think that's the
Okay.
best way to describe it. It's an on par situation, but I think if you ever in doubt, give the 30 second version, because that way
Hmm.
you can officially move on. But if you do the 2 minute version, you just stall, 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 and you might be giving over too much information that the person doesn't really necessarily want or need. They might just be interested in hearing, do you have like X experience? Like, for instance, do you have experience driving a project? Maybe that's all they care about.
Hmm.
So maybe the
Hmm.
30-second version is sufficient. And if they really
Okay.
want to, they'll be like, okay, well, can you go into a little more detail? They can always ask that follow up question. With a 2 minute
Hmm.
version, they can't ask, can you go into less detail?
I see. I see. All right. Yeah, it's only 1 minute left. I don't think we can discuss more.
I mean, it's like if you need a little bit more time and you have like a burning question, it's free. Feel free to ask.
Oh, what was it? Wait, there was another question. No, it doesn't come to my mind at the moment. Yeah, maybe some organizational questions. So like, is it okay if I booked another interview with you? Is it fine with you, or maybe you want new people all the time?
I'm fine with repeats. I'm actually more interested in repeats because, especially if I know that they have a upcoming interview. Because I really,
Mm-hmm.
okay. So let me tell you. So there's one guy I coached maybe about a month back, for his Google upcoming. He made it to the onsite, and I'm following up with him. And I told him, yeah, if you need to book an emergency session or something, contact me directly. I'll make time for you. But I have another guy who is trying to get a senior dev job at Apple. Um, so I always give higher priority to people who have like immediate interviews and have who immediately need help. And I prefer working with people over a long term basis because I can see the improvement, and that's more interesting to me than booking new clients.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I just do this for free because it's like interesting to me.
Don't you accept any donations to Patreon?
I don't have Patreon, man. I
Maybe.
don't even know if people are willing to pay for this. Like, to be honest, I'm just doing this for the fun. Like, I honestly like. Here's the thing with me. I feel bad if I take money from students that like, how to describe it? Like, they're really wanting to get into a FANG company or a top tier tech company, and as students,
Mm,
they don't have a lot of money. So I always tell them, if you feel that way, just pay me back when you get in. So that's always been my policy. I'm always very results driven.
mm,
So for people,
mm,
that's why I would prefer to work with people on a long term basis. Like, I mean, the financial incentive is there. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
honestly,
yeah.
I don't even need the money. It's just like
Yeah, I see, but
I like seeing people succeed, and it's more confirmation of my abilities as well.
yeah, but I mean, I would make some donation because it's more for me, because then I somehow feel more respect and value for what we're doing, somehow.
I mean,
And
sure,
then,
I'll email you my PayPal, and you just like pay me however you think it's worth.
yeah,
And if you feel
just
that way, that's fine.
yeah, I mean, you provide a lot of value. It's kind of, I know I can like your videos on YouTube. I subscribed already to the channel, but I don't think it's kind of enough.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Like, honestly, I'm
Yeah.
just doing this for fun because like I'm stuck with
Mm,
Corona, and it's just like
mm,
Dota 2 has gotten so boring for me because like it's my fucking games are filled with Smurfs now, and I'm just like, God damn it! It's like this is not a fun game anymore. I want to do something else.
I also wanted to tell you that, like in your video, you can clearly see cuts in the video because your mouse color changes, right? And sometimes it like abruptly changes color to some other color. Then you see now there was a cut. I mean, it,
Yeah, like
it's
that. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I like editing videos is kind of fun, but I'm not
yeah.
like the kind of person who has to be like cinematography like
Mm-hmm,
perfect. I think as long as the person gets the information and understands it, at the end, that's then I've done
mm-hmm,
my job because I'm not
mm-hmm.
trying to do like some high class fancy production value shit.
Oh yeah.
I'm just like, well, I'm here for the information only, and that's it.
And also just generally, like what do you believe like how often does it make sense to have an interview with you? Like I think maybe once per month, is it fine with you?
That's fine. It's however long because everyone works at their own pace.
Mm-hmm,
Some people can't necessarily afford to have how to describe it. They can't, they have like kids. They might have be caretakers at home, so they may not be able
mm-hmm,
to spend as much time as humanly as possible,
mm-hmm,
working on like leak code questions. But if you're
mm-hmm,
consistently working on leak codes, and you're actively practicing what I told you, I think it usually takes about 20 to 30 leak code questions to actually fully do it, like do what I asked. Like in this particular case, I want you to be able to practice like that order of priority. Make sure that you get your design down before you even write code. Just focus on
mm-hmm.
that one thing alone before you book another session. I think and if you at the rate you're going at, just what you described to me about like what you're grinding lead code sessions, I think one interview a month is sufficient. But if you feel like you feel very confident in what you just mastered, and I mean, you have grokking as well. But if once you feel very confident, just ping me again, and we'll work something out.
Okay, sounds good. Maybe I'll reschedule the next one. It's like I think in 3 weeks or so. Maybe I'll
Yeah, that's
take a little
fine.
bit longer.
Yeah, that's fine. Take your time. I'd rather just like see the improvement rather than you spamming interviews
Yeah,
and getting nowhere.
exactly. Yeah, that's yeah. I see. Also like this. Okay, so you will send me the recording, right, of this interview. Is it
Yeah,
correct?
it's gonna be on a Google Drive. I've switched over from Dropbox only because I ran out of space, and so it's just like screw it. Let's go to Google Drive. But I know they downsample some of the videos, so let me know if it's not clear.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and also your PayPal.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I think that's it. All organizational questions are clear to me now.
Hmm.
That's all from my side.
All right, cool. Talk to you later then.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really, really amazing session today.
I'm
Thank you.
glad. Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.